Good evening and welcome to this evening's program on art and activism. We have two extraordinary women with us today who are both wonderful storytellers and grassroots activists, Ruchira Gupta and Manira Alva. To introduce them briefly, Ruchira Gupta is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and founder of the anti-sex trafficking NGO Apne Aap that empowers women and girls to exit systems of prostitution. I Kick and I Fly is her debut fiction novel. She's been awarded the French Ordre National du Mérite, the Clinton Global Citizen Award, and a Doctor of Humane Letters degree from Smith College, among other honors, for her contribution to the establishment of the UN Trafficking Fund for Survivors, the passage of the US Trafficking Victims Protection Act. I'll say that again, the US Trafficking Victims Protection Act, and her work as founder of the NGO Apne Aap. She has co-written a book with Gloria Steinem, As If Women Matter, edited 2 anthologies, and made an award-winning documentary, The Selling of Innocence. She's worked for the United Nations in Nepal, Thailand, Kosovo, Iran, and the US, and occasionally teaches at New York University's Center for Global Affairs. She divides her time between New York and Forbesganj, her childhood home in the foothills of the Himalayas, where she furthers the work of Apne Aap and paints her mother's garden. Manira Alva brings over 3 decades of multi-genre media experience, gendered policy, programmatic design, and political movement building to the Vital Voices senior leadership team, where she works with girls and women leaders taking on the world's greatest challenges. Leading advocacy on issues, she stewards the relationship with the United Nations and other multilaterals, and oversees fellowships in collaboration with the Council of World Women Leaders and the Kennedy School. She was previously appointed to India's High-Level Committee on the Status of Women by Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. Manira's work as an activist, administrator, and educator, like Ruchira's, is truly inspiring from what I have heard briefly about her advocacy for women in various parts of the world. Detailed biographies for both the speakers are on the BIC website. Please take a minute to silence your mobile phones. And without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Ruchira Gupta to share her story on art and activism, and then discuss with Manira Alva her book, her work, and the work that is yet to be done. We will begin with a short video on the book, I Kick and I Fly.
This iconic scene from Teesri Kasam has resonated with many, symbolizing a tragic reality faced by countless women.
सामान लग गया
मैं दुख चुकी हूँ मीता
भाई जल्दी करो ना गाड़ी छूट जाएगी चलो ना भाई चलो ना चलो अरे लाट पात के बाहर निकल जाओ यार कोई पकड़ लेगा चलो यार
But what if the narrative could change? In my book, I Kick and I Fly, another Hira stands in the same Mela ground in Forbesganj from the same Nut tribe. Her story unfolds differently.
I am Hira. I am Hira. I am Hira. I am Hira. I am Hira.
Each one of these brave girls embodies the spirit of Hira, who declares, "My body belongs to me and no one else. I will kick and fly. I will live a life without fear." Based on true stories from my NGO Apne Aap, this book is more than fiction. It's a testament to resilience, courage, and the fight for freedom.
Good evening, friends, and welcome. We're ready to kick this conversation off. Full disclosure, I have known, been mentored by, collaborated with, and worked with Ruchira over, I would say, 2 decades, if I'm not mistaken. Our friendship started in Delhi as journalists, went across borders to the US, and we are back here in Bangalore with you. Ruchira, I'm going to kick it off with Bruce Lee. You've given us a story that goes from the local to the global, which is fascinating, instead of it always being the other way around. And, the Bruce Lee quote, which I loved, be like water.
Flow, don't crash.
Flow don't crash.
Flow, don't crash. And knowing you over the years, I think that is something you have seamlessly done. We were all journalists who were impacted by the stories we covered, but you went ahead and decided to do something about it. You set up an NGO, you have worked in this space from the 90s. And just for a little background, this year will be 25 years since the first laws on anti-trafficking actually came into being. And Ruchira and an incredible group of women activists from around the world who are also a part, I think, of the organization I work with now, Vital Voices, were brought together to testify about what they had seen on the ground from India, Nepal, Russia, Ukraine, and several other countries. So tell us, Ruchira, why is it today that an activist has to slowly meander towards the arts to continue with the work they are doing? Why are we seeing this mutation of activists doing stuff on the ground, now moving towards the arts the world over?
I don't see a binary between art and activism anyway. My activism has always been connected to creativity. It began, as you know, first as a journalist, and even that has a backstory. Before I became a journalist, I wanted to be a writer, and I thought I could tell stories which would make a difference. And when I was in college, a new newspaper opened in my hometown, Kolkata, and I decided I would just try and get a job there. The editor was Akbar, and the paper was The Telegraph. And he said, you have to be a graduate. So I sort of negotiated with him and went to college in the daytime and to the newspaper from 3 in the afternoon to 11 in the evening. And I tried to always write stories which would make a difference. And in that journey, at one point, I was walking in the hills of Nepal when I came across villages with no girls. And I was surprised, and I asked the men who were sitting there drinking tea and playing cards where the girls were. And they said, don't you know, they all are in Mumbai. I followed the trail and found little girls locked up in tiny rooms for years. And some of them were displayed in cages. This is 1994, 1995, 1996. And I was shocked and angry and sad and also eventually determined to do something about it. And of course, I turned to art. I made a documentary on the subject. It's called The Selling of Innocence. It's on my website, and I poured my passion into it to break the silence of what I saw was visible in plain sight and yet invisible in our consciousness. And then when I was on stage in New York, and I was getting applauded, and I won an Emmy for outstanding investigative journalism, all I could see beyond the bright lights and the eyes of the audience were the eyes of the mothers who had broken their silence to tell me their stories because they wanted to save their daughters. So in that moment, I decided I would use my journalism, my art, if you will, not to build a career in journalism, but to make a difference. And I stepped off the stage and turned to Donna Shalala, who was the US Secretary of Health at that time. And I said, you've given me the award. What about helping me make change, connect me to the UN, connect me to senators and congressmen? And I was 20-something. And she did. And fast forward, I showed the documentary at the UN. and asked 160 delegates who were sitting in the audience from different countries, saying we need a law which will punish traffickers and decriminalize the women and girls. Did the same at the US Senate for a bipartisan bill now known as the Trafficking Victim Protection Act. So I can proudly say, yes, I contributed to the passage of those two things, the UN protocol and the US law. It took longer in India, but we kept mobilizing and organizing. And the way I did it was, I had been brought up in a Gandhian socialist household. So we were always told that you have to go to the community. If you want people to listen to you, you have to listen to people. And change begins from the bottom and transforms the top. So of course, with the award, I went back to the women in Mumbai who had told me their stories. And I said, I won the award, I've told your story. And they said, no, that's not enough. You have to help us. And I said, but I don't know. I'm not a social worker. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. How can I help you? And they said that you have access to money, you have access to English, and you have access to networks which we don't. I said, yes, I do. And that's how the journey of the NGO began, because we decided to call it Apne Aap, which means self-action in Hindi. And we called it Apne Aap Women Worldwide because we wanted to build solidarity with people across the world fighting the same battles. And we asked, I didn't even know how to make a business plan. So I asked the women, what do you want? And they had 4 dreams: school for their children, a room of their own, for those of you who know Virginia Woolf, a job in an office, and punishment of the perpetrators. And literally that was my business plan. And we set up community classrooms everywhere, started educating the kids. Fast forward, and we stopped counting after COVID. So till the year of COVID, we had helped more than 3,000 kids from red light areas, many of them from nomadic tribes trapped in intergenerational prostitution, to not only finish school and college, but get jobs, and still continuing. We transformed red light areas in some parts. We worked into non-red light areas. We put more than 64 traffickers in jail. And we helped more than 20,000 women exit systems of prostitution. And in Forbesganj, which I write about, the agricultural town on the border of Nepal, dirt poor, one such community center existed, and one such group of people who were trapped in intergenerational prostitution from colonial times existed. They were labeled as criminal tribes under British colonialism. And they broke through hard work and perseverance because of our NGO's support. And one of the pivotal moments of them breaking through was Kung Fu. And I think martial arts is itself an art, and there are no binaries between art and life and activism, as I found and understood. I might have done something subconsciously, but I didn't understand it till I began writing about it. And I've always found that I can reach more people, make a deeper impact, even as an activist, through art.
Got it. Thank you for that, Ruchira. So tell us about Forbesganj. Gloria Steinem and Ashley Judd, who have written recommendations of the book, have visited the place. Tell us a little bit about what it felt like having these icons in Forbesganj, visiting these places and meeting the young girls there.
So Gloria Steinem has visited Forbesganj 5 times. Ashley Judd, one of the leaders of the Me Too movement, an actor, a Hollywood actor, has visited Forbesganj thrice. And both of them are also influenced by Gandhi. And Gloria says her feminism was shaped by the few years that she spent in India following Gandhians to quell caste riots. And some of it she spent in Karnataka, actually. And she says that, it didn't matter to them that she was a white woman. She was a woman. And they needed to get into homes to quell caste riots. And she put on a sari, and they used to go with she says, a toothbrush, a cup, and a comb. And they would just go to huts and sleep with the people and talk. And she, was influenced a lot by Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay also, who she says is her last teacher. And so, when I began, Gloria had sought me out and said, I hear that you're doing something, and can I come see you? So I had put her in an auto rickshaw in Delhi and taken her to a slum. And, I didn't think Gloria would make such a big impact, but I wanted to spend time with her. And she's like the Martin Luther King of the women's movement for all of us. And so here we are in the slum. It's drizzling. Gloria knows English. The women know Hindi. And I thought, this is not going to work. But Gloria began to speak about an abortion that she had on her way to India and how she was escaping a marriage to come to India and how she hid it for the longest time. And she connected with the women. And that was my first learning from Gloria Steinem. She said that, the reason I reached out to you was because I knew you were working at the grassroots among the women. And the reason I came to speak with you to these women was because I was sharing my truth. And that is why we connected. You have to honor each other with the truth. And we are linked, not ranked. And if you want people to listen to you, you have to listen to them. So Gloria spent as much time asking the women what their issues and concerns were. And that change begins from the bottom and transforms the top. So these things I learned from Gloria, and I thought, okay, it's pretty banal. I know it, because of my own Gandhian socialist upbringing. And there's someone sitting in the audience whose father gave me the first book of Gandhiji, Experiments with Truth, and then the Louis Fisher book, so it was just like things which I'd learned, but I saw in practice. And Gloria and I just became instant friends. We both were journalists. We both were activists, unified by the same values. And I used to go to New York and stay at her place. And she began to come to India to see how I was organizing. What was I doing? What was I doing in this decade to organize women at the grassroots in the dirt poor place called Forbesganj in Bihar, which was part of the whole Bengal famine the place impacted. And that's how it happened, and it continues even till this day. This desire for change, but change which is really very grounded in reality, in community, and which is non-violent, and which is sustainable, and which is led by the community. So that's how Gloria and that's why Gloria kept coming to Forbesganj. The other thing which also happened was that Ashley Judd too is a follower of Gandhi. Mm-hmm. And she liked the approach that I would talk to about my feminism and the way I was organizing and changing things. So same thing, another feminist connected us. And of course, she wanted to see and do volunteer work with the women and girls that I was working with. So she kept coming every year and living in Forbesganj, and even making cow dung patties with the women in their mud huts. Because we deeply believe that prostitution is a form of violence against women, and it should not exist. And the only way we can end it is by practicing non-violence ourselves as women, saying no to violence inflicted on us. But also men have to practice non-violence because they violate something inside themselves when they go violate women, and that makes them more angry and violent. So these were the principles, and the other principle was, of course, Antodaya, that you have to reach the last girl if you want to bring about change. You can't throw seeds in the air and change will happen. So Ashley also came because of that.
Would you like to read us something from your book, Ruchira, which captures some of these ideas?
Yes. So you already know what the book is about from the video. It's a 14-year-old girl called Hira, who's born in a nomadic nut tribe. Her family is dirt poor. There's no food at home. Her father is working for the local crime overlord, Ravi Lala. And her mother's breaking stones on the highway to just get food at home. The entire lane of 72 mud huts along the railway tracks, and on the other side is the Mela ground, is made up of brothels, where the front room is a brothel, where the customers come, and the back room is where the family lives. And when the Mela comes, girls are sold off and auctioned off to customers when the Mela comes. So, and every girl in that nut tribe is told this is her destiny. And all this began when many nomadic tribes in India during British colonialism in the 1850s were labeled as criminal tribes. And there were only two reasons why they were labeled as criminal tribes. One was that they manufactured things which the British wanted to sell and make. So if they made medicines from forest produce, they were told, oh, you're quacks.
and you're outlawed from doing that. We'll replace you with Glaxo. If they were selling dairy products and meat from the goat and the sheep they were keeping, they were told, no, you can't do that. That's banned because we want to replace you with Caventers. If they were making bridges from rope or utensils from iron, they were not allowed. There were engineering firms from England which had to come. To the point that they were also told you can't move from one place to another. You can't wear hats, can't wear shoes, can't ride horses. And they were evicted also from their forests. So they ended up squatting on lands where they were performing the most menial chores for either zamindars or British authorities. And of course, the women slowly became sexually available, and the men were forced to pimp their own wives, daughters, sisters. And so that is how prostitution became intergenerational in these communities, and to the point that they forgot that they did anything else. And this is one such tribe that Hira is born in, and she believes that being sold into prostitution is her duty and her destiny. And her mother does not want her to have this destiny. Her mother wants her to go to school, but she's expelled from school for stealing an egg and beating up the class bully in the first chapter itself. And her cousin sister has already been sold into prostitution. And her cousin sister also says that you have to get back to school. And her younger sister, Chotu, is dead, 3-year-old girl, because the roof is leaking and they don't have any money to send her to the hospital. So this is a conversation between the cousin sister and Hira. The cousin sister is trying to convince Hira to go to school, but Hira feels no point. Though there's a women's right advocate who says, I'll help you even though you're expelled from school to get back into school. I will teach you to fight by learning Kung Fu. But Hira thinks something is wrong. She should not do it.
Isn't that true story?
It's every anecdote is based on true stories. Everything in the book. What if everyone in Girls Bazaar, Chacha and Baba are right? Did Chotu die because of me? What if I did bring bad luck to the family? I voice my doubts aloud. This grabs Miradi's attention. Since when did you begin to believe in this superstitious nonsense? I don't meet Miradi's eye, focusing instead on Jamila Bua as she fries the onion fritters for the lunchtime rush. A black crow drives a sparrow away from the garbage. It's a stark reminder that the mightiest will survive, that destiny decides who will be mighty. It's the way of the world, Miradi. If destiny hasn't decided where I was born, who has? It's all a birth lottery. I say bitterly, walking up and down inside the small space of our mud hut. Miradi comes and hugs me. She strokes my head. I know you feel frustrated, but do you have a choice? What else can you do? I steer the conversation away from my destiny. In my heart, I know that I don't believe the superstitions, but all the women in our lane believe in the eternal, inescapable fate of our nomadic nut tribe because they can't imagine anything beyond it. There was no defined mother or cousin or sister or teacher to fight for them. I decide to spell out my other fear. What if I don't understand anything? There, I've said it. I don't want to be the stupidest kid in the class. Miradi looks at me with no expression on her face. As far as I remember, you did fine in school. You used to be so fond of books. I could not tear you away from the dusty library. She smiles. I smile back. I did love the library, the smell of books and the stories. Tagore, Sharat Chandra, Mahadevi Verma, Mahashweta Devi, and the adventure stories by the English writers Enid Blyton and Laura Lee Hope. Words have always come easily to me. Then came the hunger, the bullying, the chores at home, my first menstruation. Everything slipped away. That was because you and Salman would help me when I got stuck, I mumble. So why don't you ask him to help you, Miradi suggests. Oh, he's so busy with his own studies. Can't you help me? Do you think I remember anything after the hell I've lived through these past few years? There's an aggressive edge to Miradi's voice. Under her clumsy makeup is a desperate appeal. I look at her and remember her full-throated and happy laugh as a girl. I resolve to rekindle the laughter, light, and hope in her eyes. Outside, the sky is grey, the sun sending out weak rays through the mist. Far off, a train whistle blows. I give Meeradi's hand a squeeze. I promise I will go and meet Rini, who wants to enroll me in school and the Kung Fu program. I will. Meeradi smiles again. She gets up to go. I will send word to Rini that you will go to her tomorrow, she says, as she ties a scarf around her head. Her body language changes. She stiffens, drawing in her shoulders as she walks away. Selfishly, perhaps I realize that I'm not just doing this for her. I want to be a person. I want to kick and fly. I want to win. I want to have the courage, like Rini Di, to demand a life without fear. Bekhauf Zindagi.
Wow. I think this pretty much captures the predicament of the girl child, right? And so many welfare programs interwoven that today people seem to think don't make sense. Because there is a line, I think in the first chapter, which talks about how she goes to school after the weekend more hungry, right? And the idea of the midday meal scheme and the whole fight over an egg, which is actually protein and helps so many children to fight off being anemic, which of course today is again controversial as it falls into the non-vegetarian part of the meal. But what is really interesting is it is the midday meal that gets the mother to say, at least you're going to get a meal you need to go to school. And finally, it is this interest and this dabbling with Kung Fu that gets her to stay back in school and really opens the doors to everything else. So it's education, yes, but it is all these other things, the ingredients that make this whole story so interesting. How did you weave in all these components? There's a lot of 80s, 90s, 2000s, a lot of nostalgia, a lot of poignancy. How long was this book in the making, Ruchira?
It's all based on lived experience. Every anecdote in the book is based on a true story I experienced, I witnessed, or was told to me. It begins in Forbesganj and ends in Queens, New York. And as my work grew, I met more and more survivors across the world, and I would listen to what they were saying, and I saw that hunger was such a basic issue for people who were trafficked. And very often we go around saying, oh, it's a choice, but actually prostitution is based on absence of choice. And we don't understand that basic needs are human rights. And I saw that, in my own NGO in Forbesganj, how kids didn't have shoes to wear. Something happened once, I remember, that in my community center, the kids were not paying attention and they were abusing the teacher and all of that. And I said, why aren't you all paying attention? The kids said, oh, we are hungry. Oh, no, our stomachs are hurting. So I thought they were lying. I took them to a doctor. I said, I'm going to show you to a doctor. And the doctor said, yes, their stomachs are hurting. They're hungry. That's when we began the midday meal program. And I actually used to see girls slip an egg into their pocket to take home to their mothers or siblings or brothers, So that's when I realized, what we take so much for granted is almost unattainable for so many people. And the 70s, 80s that you describe and which we lived through, Manira, was really the crux of our anti-trafficking program. To link the girls to the midday meal, to link the women to having a voter card or a caste certificate so they could access low-cost food or low-cost housing. We think it's not a struggle, but every little thing was a struggle. But now, the new challenge is that what if all this is dismantled? What if there is no low-cost food? What if there's no low-cost housing? What if there is no midday meal with eggs and protein? Are the girls going to become anemic and stunted? How would an NGO like mine in today's India run an anti-trafficking program if there are budget cuts for each of these things? What if the pink schools that I sent Hira to and girls like Hira to, what if those are closed down in budget cuts? Just this week I hear that the university budgets have been cut by 61%. So, all this is something which the girls like Hira will have to grapple with in the future.
Did you contact our women's department, the ministry, etc., ever for any additional help?
we'll just,
It's okay. It's a small group. No problem.
yeah, that's true.
We're going to open it out anyway. But I can see that you have a question. So go ahead.
So yeah, I have met the Minister for Women and Child in Karnataka, in Bihar, in Rajasthan, and Bengal, and Telangana. So I have met them. They've just all got recently elected, and they do want to do more work against trafficking for DNTs, and will work out plans. But the budget cuts I'm talking of are at the central level. So if the money doesn't come to the state, how will the state spend it? And I've seen this really very acutely felt in Bihar, where these programs are running. It's just because Bihar is so dependent on money coming from the center.
So to bring it back a little bit, Ruchira, there's a whole lot of people who seem to think a lot of these problems are restricted to the global south. It's nothing that happens in the global north. But this book is really incredible because it takes you from Forbesganj, Bihar, all the way to Queens in New York, right? It shows you the roots that exist, the inequities in both sides, and the fact that they're fueled by greed, right? Eventually, it's about someone making money at the expense of someone. So what was your experience like when you reach New York, you're in Queens, and then you're listening to these stories and you're saying, I've heard the story before, I've heard it back home. What was that feeling like? And tell us about a little bit of the organizing that happens there too.
So human trafficking is the second largest organized crime in the world. And there is no country which is not preyed upon by traffickers, and including the United States. In India, the average age of a girl being sold into prostitution is between 9 and 13. In America, it's 13 to 15. And of course, the person that they prey upon, this girl who I call the last girl, is marked by intersecting inequalities. She's poor, she's female, she's a teenager. In India, she's from an oppressed caste or community, religion. And in America, she is from either Black or Native American communities. In Europe, she is maybe a refugee or from an ethnic minority. So she exists everywhere, and because of these intersecting inequalities, her access to her basic needs, food, clothing, shelter, education, even legal protection, are cut off. And traffickers know that. And human trafficking is a demand-driven industry, right? So it's not that a girl is at 10, she says, I'm going to grow up to be a prostitute. What happens to her is that there is a man somewhere out there who says, I want a 7-year-old, Naya Mal, he calls, or fresh meat, and the younger, the better, and all of that. And he defines what he's looking for, start surfing the net nowadays. Earlier he would just articulate it, and traffickers see a profit in it. So then they go looking for these last girls everywhere in the world and go prey on them. They'll tell their parents, we'll get her a job in the big city, we'll get her married, or even say that we are putting her into prostitution, but at least she'll have food and roof over her heads. And that's how the whole business runs and runs and runs. And now it's become a multi-billion-dollar industry. As the second largest organized crime in the world, crossed the drug trade. And so you can imagine how big it is. So when I wove the arc of my story, it began in Forbesganj with Hira, but eventually she does notice these brothels in Queens in New York, and girls being locked up there and customers coming there as well. She also spends time in a shelter there, which is, all these people are preparing for a championship, a martial arts championship, and she meets girls just like her who have been trafficked to different parts of America and who are all fighting to survive. And so they exchange stories and they find how universal their experience is. And the only way out is through sort of kind of building community and friendships and collective resistance. And I write it, of course, as an adventure story. So it's very like a fast page turner, but the brothels of Queens exist just as much as the brothels of Mumbai. and patriarchy exists in every country. So when I was in America, and I've met survivor leaders from the whole world, from Ireland, from America, from Iceland, from France, and they come visit my NGO here. We go visit them. And, I was one of the big advocates for survivor-centric change. So they would tell me their stories. And one such woman who was trafficked from Indonesia to Queens told me how how she escaped the brothel by putting on a burqa. And that's the story you have here. So.
Let's talk about the men in your book, Ruchira. They're interesting. They're all shades from brothers, fathers, traffickers, cops, politicians. Tell us about how they encompassed all sides of the story. A little bit on that and why it's so important within the systems that you work in.
So, the men in my story are both adults and boys. There's the class bully, who is a police officer's son. He's upper caste, and he's the one who teases Hira in the first chapter for stealing an egg when she steals it. And she kicks his teeth, and she's expelled from school. That's why the first part of the book's name is I Kick. But then how does she learn to fly? And what happens to the class bully? There's an arc in the story. And I don't want to give the story away, the plot away, but there are 2 more fights that she has. And she does win them. So, but then she has a brother called Salman, who's a very kind boy. He's older than her. And he's, he loves science. He's a really good student. But he decides to drop out of school and become a porter because he tells Hira at one point in the story that what's the point of my dreams if my sister is told I will cut my dreams to size. And so there are conversations like that between this brother and sister. There's one conversation about God that they have. Does God really exist? Which is a beautiful conversation. And then there is like the evil character who's Ravi Lala, who's the big crime overlord, who's completely insensitive, dehumanized, etc. And then the arc of character of Hira's own father, who wants to sell his daughter because he believes that's the duty of every nut girl, that's their destiny. He's an alcoholic, he abuses her mother, he works for the crime lord, and doesn't believe anything can be done, and how he changes as Hira changes. To the point that first he wants to sell her, and then at some point when she's kidnapped, he goes and rescues her, and she asks him, she has this conversation, that why did you want to sell me? And that, again, you have to read the book.
That's a very beautiful part of the book, in fact, which really gives us sometimes an insight into the mind of a parent facing abject poverty and having to make choices. And it basically not all being black and white, right? There are so many shades of gray within this. I would love to open it out to the audience. I know you all haven't yet read the book, but Ruchira, would you like to read maybe another little bit, especially bring in Bruce Lee, who arrives in, through this book to Forbesganj and literally changes the life of this young girl. I found that really interesting, the whole Bruce Lee part of it.
Okay, but why don't you start asking people to ask questions while I look for the... So there's a quote by Bruce Lee which says, "Be like water, flow, don't crash." And, to inspire Hira, really this woman's right advocate gives Hira a book by Bruce Lee, which has diagrams of him flying in the air and little philosophical text. And, whenever Hira's alone and she feels that she's going to be losing the battle, she picks up this book and looks to Bruce Lee for inspiration. So I'm going to find something, but just give
I think I put you in a spot. Let's maybe take it a little bit towards owning one's body, right? That's really the parallel it draws about how living in this small area where girls and women's bodies are up to the highest bidder, being sold by their brothers and their fathers. Here is a girl who's using Kung Fu to reclaim her body and her agency. Tell us a little bit about how did you introduce Kung Fu in Apne Aap? What was the background to that?
When we were running the NGO, we faced resistance from the traffickers, and they would sometimes kidnap our girls. They would jump over the hostel wall and pull out the girls. Sometimes they would beat up the mothers. Sometimes they would lock them up over the weekend if they came home, and all of that. They would attack our staff, our offices. So I thought that, it's going to be really hard to take on these traffickers for every girl that I'm trying to put through school and college. So why not at least teach her how to fight back, break a few teeth in the process? So it's not like an easy walkover for the traffickers. And so, in Forbesganj, along the rice fields, there was a couple, a man and a woman, who were teaching karate to some kids every day. I went to them and I asked them, I said, will you come to our community center, to our hostel, to teach the kids martial arts? And they agreed. And fast forward, the girls began to do really well. And they began to break burning tiles, and they began to start running fast and, be very, very agile and flexible and winning gold medals. And of course, one of the reasons was that they came from a family of pehlwans and acrobats, the people who knew how to do that. And so there were champion wrestlers in Hira's family. And everything began to change when a girl just like Hira won a gold medal in karate. That became the pivot for the bullies in school to stop bullying her, but it also became the pivot for the teachers to respect her, the townspeople to think, oh, these girls are worth something, and for the father to think that his daughter was valuable and a nut girl could have a different destiny. And of course, Hira changed. She began to stop hating her body. Her shoulders opened up, she began to walk straighter. And she also began to do better in class, even though she was a first generation learner, because she began to like herself. And she says in this book that learning self-defense, I learned I have a self worth defending.
Wow, that's a lovely line. I think this links also to the Government of India's special area games, right? Where they picked people who were naturally brought up with things like archery and swimming from the coast, and promoted them to national sports persons with specific training. I think that was a 90s program. Have you found your passage, or shall we just open it out for a little while?
Because it'll take me, I'll read it later, but I'll keep looking.
Yeah, go ahead. He's coming with the mic.
Ruchira, thank you for that. I must admit that when I saw the invite, I actually went back and watched the documentary first. And I think it's still very relevant even after so many years. Which also takes me back to the question I want to put to you and possibly get some view from you that why is it that in spite of all the efforts of people like yourself and so many others involved in it, this problem continues to grow? And clearly advocacy, policy, funds are all sort of things that we need to be working on. But what else can be done to actually make this more impactful and actually rescue more girls, or probably stop them from getting to the trade in the first place?
I think the reason it still exists is that we haven't done enough. We are still, we think prostitution is inevitable. We think men will be men. We think if prostitutes, quote unquote, don't exist, girls from good families will be raped. So the whole edifice of sex trafficking rests on sexism and elitism at many levels. And what we have to really do is make sure that we do enough, because somewhere in our heads we think these girls are disposable creatures. Somebody somewhere can be sold, and that's how the system will continue. And we have to stop believing that. We have to stop believing that because the most men I know don't want to buy girls, but they keep silent. So we need men to say it's not okay. and to talk to other men to say it's not okay, in sales conferences or conventions or sports meets that they go to. We once ran a campaign called Cool Men Don't Buy Sex. Another campaign was called Purchase of Sex is Not a Sport, which we ran, when there were big Super Bowl events, etc. To talk to men that, buying a girl is really turning her into a commodity. It's nothing like Julia Roberts smiling. The smile is fake. Also, the other thing that we need to do, so we need laws which will go after the demand, which will punish traffickers, but will also deter sex buyers and hold them accountable, because it is really rape, just paid rape. And so basically those laws need to be put into more countries. It has begun. So now it's known as the equality model or the Nordic model. And it's there in Sweden and Norway and France and the US federal law. We got the first such law in the state of Maine recently. And so we are going in country after country to change those laws, and their trafficking and prostitution has come down. The other is more investment to increase choices for the last girl, so that she can resist the traffickers because she has food, she has education, she has housing, and, she can build a life of dignity. Because they're starting literally from scratch, and we have to understand that. So what we call the welfare state should not be dismantled, which is being dismantled across the world, right? So it's going to make it harder for the last girl to work her way out of things like this. So we have to go after the supply and demand, but demand is the biggest thing which needs to be disrupted.
Ruchira, there's also this huge movement across the world to start defining it as sex work, as in work by choice, as opposed to prostitution. We know that there's this huge shift in language, in terminology. We want to believe that a 7-year-old has the right to choose work, and therefore we want to call it sex work. We know that countries now have stopped tracking sex work, but are looking at it as labor trafficking. So you're going to see globally all sorts of numbers coming down, though the problem is not coming down. It's just being tracked as labor trafficking. So you've been very vocal. You've been very clearly on the side of a growing group now who says, no, this is not choice and this is not work. Would you like to talk a little bit about that global debate too?
Yes. What is at stake here is how we define exploitation, because the debate really is that does choice define exploitation? Because we may choose many things as a survival strategy. If I'm in the middle of a war and I have to live, and a soldier says, I'll smuggle you out, sleep with me, or I'll traffic you to pimp you to someone else, I will say yes, but that's a choice under duress. And same thing with starving mothers or starving girls who are in drought-prone villages or flood-hit provinces or whatever, or just marginalized again and again because of their caste or their class or their religion or their ethnicity. So, what we see as choice is really an absence of choice. And until we understand that, we won't be able to define exploitation fully. Exploitation really needs to be defined as the harm it causes. And prostitution is based on body invasion. And body invasion is bound to have certain physical and mental health consequences, which are, of course, physical consequences. I don't need to go into graphic detail, but intimate body contact based on invasion of the body can lead to anything from just low intensity fever all the time to backaches, standing on the street waiting for a customer, to insomnia because you have to be available for a man night or day, to bruises on the body, to tuberculosis, jaundice, sexually transmitted diseases, and of course, the mental health consequences, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and that is now ranging from anger to depression to suicidal attempts to so much other, because most alienation, because all the women who are put into prostitution pretend they are not there when the customer is on top of them. So they dream of China or whatever. So this out-of-body experience, it's called. And now research shows that women in prostitution suffer from higher rates of PTSD than even returning war veterans. So because of that, I did think about this, that does the word sex worker save the woman, help the woman in any way? And I discarded it because I thought it's a trick being played on me not to sterilize the exploitation out of what is happening to the woman. So I use the word prostituted woman or prostituted child because I want people to think about what has happened to her. And either it is individual force or force of circumstances. So even in Hindi, I say Vaishyai Karan, not Vaishyavritti, to make people think about it. And that is my thing, why I don't use the word sex worker, because there's no exploitation. It's not work. It's really exploitation, because you cannot legislate away body invasion, and words have consequences. So which is why I don't want to use a word which will sterilize exploitation. And this is at stake for many other issues right now. In the world, how do we define exploitation? If the market drives it, then anything which is paid for, sale of kidneys, surrogacy, everything will be considered fine. Never mind what happens to the person who goes through the experience.
Yeah. Oh, the mic is here after this.
I wanted to ask you that when you first wrote this topic with your family members and relatives, etc., and close friends, what was their reaction when you actually said that I'm going to actually work on the ground? So what was their reaction and how do you cope up? I'm sure there must have been some resistance. And second thing is, were you physically harmed by all these traffickers and goons, etc., or did they try to harm you where you really saw the threat and danger to your life?
I even as a kid, I've never asked for permission to do anything. So I always tell people after I've done something. So when I was following the trail to the brothels of Mumbai, I didn't tell my parents. I was in Kathmandu and I said, I have to find out where the girls are. And I went to Mumbai and I got into the red light district. They only knew as I went along, by which time I'd already done this or that, so, and that, my parents are okay with that, obviously. In fact, I remember in Bombay, I used to stay with my grandmother, my Nani. And, she also wouldn't stop, but sometimes I would wake up at night, thinking about what, apparently I would talk in my sleep. And next day I would get up to go to the red light district and she would say, "Fir se ja rahi hai tu wahan?" And I would say, "Yes," and I would be off. And that was it. There was no, in the kind of family I grew up in, there was no question of anyone stopping anyone from doing anything. It was a very socialist upbringing. So permissions were not something. They did feel worried. One time I did have a knife pulled at my throat. Inside the brothels of Kamtipura in Mumbai, which were like 20 inside a chawl, one staircase, 20 rooms in a row, one toilet at the end, one small door for each room, iron bars on the window, no exit literally, like Jean-Paul Sartre. And there I was, and this man had pulled out a knife and said, "I will not let you film here." And the women surrounded me, about 22 women or so, and they said, "If you have to kill her, you've got to kill us first." And so they saved my life. And in that instance, I realized the power of female collective action and a community coming together around something that it cared about. And they were supposed to be powerless and I was supposed to be powerful, but it was the opposite in that moment. And, along the way, I took many more stands. I succeeded, lost something, failed somewhere. But each thing gave me more strength. So I developed more strategies. Our offices were attacked. I was threatened. People would say, "Aapko, we would make you 6 inches shorter," which meant that your head is going to be cut off. So I would say that's written in God's hand, not yours, So I carried on and, that's it.
Manu has it.
I don't want to be a devil's advocate, but is there any harm in seeing trafficking as a broader problem and not just women trafficking? Because that gets around this thing about whether sex work or any other kind of work. And perhaps you'd get more support or broader support if you didn't try to prevent this categorization of trafficking women as being more important than any other kind of trafficking.
We do, sex trafficking is part of the broader broader trend of human trafficking. Of course, there is trafficking for cheap labor, there is trafficking for child soldiers, there is trafficking for the organ trade, bonded labor. So there are different reasons for trafficking, and we've listed them in the UN protocol when we were helping to draft it, that these are the different kinds of trafficking. And, all the research we've done shows that 70% of the trafficking is for women and children, and that too, most of it, the majority of it, is for sexual exploitation. Yes, there is a continuum of abuse. So a woman who's used for labor exploitation will also be sexually exploited. Especially, we know about the trafficking of maids to the Middle East or other places. That happens very much so. So women are prone to be trafficked both for labor and sexually exploited at the same time. It can happen. And we are part of a larger movement against human trafficking, in which we say that sex trafficking is this big chunk, and then we explain what is the unique thing in sex trafficking which is different to other kinds of labor trafficking, which is that here you have to sex trafficking is based on body invasion, and you can only earn the maximum on your first day in the job, because as your body gets used, you can earn less or less. So it's not sustainable after 3 or 4 years. To put it very crudely, it's the shelf life of a woman is 4 to 5 years. And then literally the old age pension is disease and death. Whereas with labor trafficking, you can, create better working conditions. You can end labor trafficking and put that person who's acquired some skills into something else. The intimate contact of the end user with the woman is different. The seller and the sold sometimes merge into the same thing. So it's very unique.
Good evening. In mass acts like cine industries, women's bodies are more treated like commodity. How we act collectively, how we understand this issue collectively. Because these artists influencing values like rural peoples, like that, it's more influencing how we collectively understand and act.
So the 3 or 4 strategies which have succeeded, and I can share that with you, and we can, of course, there are 5 things I would say. The first is that we have to create more knowledge and awareness. And one of the things is, like I've written a book, I've made a documentary, translate it into different languages, show it to different people, share the knowledge, right? And humanize the victims. So they don't treat them like cardboard creatures, with lipstick on their faces smiling, because behind the smile is hunger. And so we have to humanize the victims, and that is the trouble I've taken in writing fiction, is she's got feelings and emotions, and she goes through what every teenager goes through, is in not an as extreme a situation as Hira, but she does face body shaming, complicated family relationships, betrayals in friendships, and courage and resilience, So these are things that mental health issues, which are so big now. So Hira goes through all of that. And by reading something like this, then people will understand and maybe have empathy and make connection, and that brings about change. So that's the first thing, knowledge and awareness. Second is, to volunteer in organizations, and Cynthia Stephen is sitting here, but there are many such organizations in every city across the world. So go offer your services. You can become social media ambassadors, you can become teachers, you can just help keep the accounts of the NGO. All of us are strapped for resources at any time. That helps a lot. And the one thing I should tell you as an activist, lifelong activist for 30 years now, is that when you do something, you don't know if it's big or small. Only time will show that. But you have to do it as if it matters. So you have to if you care about this, you will have to do it like that. Do something small, but it will matter. The third is that you can organize a group discussion in your school, in your college, in your place of work, around these topics. And by doing that, you send a signal to those silent men who are maybe buying girls that this workplace is not okay with it, right? The fourth is you can advocate for laws, you can write to policymakers, that in this district we know this exists. Why? Just keep hammering away, People ask me. And then fifth is ask for budget allocations and budgets. Demand it that, we always say, oh, subsidies are bad. Actually, subsidies are not bad. These are just historical corrections for people who are marginalized.
And if I may add, you could start reading this book from the back because it actually tells you everything you could do, how you could be a resource, how you could tackle the problem. So I actually started reading it from the back first and then went to the front because there's a literal how to, what to kind of do if you're interested in tackling the problem.
So welcome to Bangalore, Ruchira. I'm glad I could make it. As she's already mentioned, I also work with women and children's issues, and I had the pleasure, I would say, or the privilege of being part of Apne Aap's program in 2018. I think it was a UN issue in which I was also one of the participants, but I heard incredible stories of 4 other women who were survivors. I was the only one who was not a survivor but an advocate. The other 4 women who spoke at that event were survivors, and it was incredible how there was one woman, one young girl, very beautiful young girl, talented girl from Canada. There was a lady from Africa, I remember. There was a Hispanic lady who spoke also, and she was a very powerful advocate. She had become a survivor and then, became a very powerful advocate. I think it's very important to do what you're doing, Ruchira, because there's so little spoken about what is going on.
Yeah.
And as a theoretician, perhaps I would say, and also working in the intersectional feminist area, people don't realize what actually it is. It is a kind of robbing people of their childhoods, their selves, only because they are female. And it is only because societal practices sanction this male expression of male sexuality, because you talked about the demand. But what is that demand really? We have to understand what that demand is. And if we are also consuming, the people who are consuming females' bodies are also probably consuming pornography. You see? So there's an entire ecosystem which keeps women and girls poor and disadvantaged on the one hand, and gives males a power over their bodies very, and weakens them. And the structural issues are what, that is why she has pointed out that there's this there are the intersect of various disadvantages, social disadvantages, systemic disadvantages. And those who would like to be a part of the solution need to, and we really need men to be a part of this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've been advocating for decades and nothing has happened. The gentleman who asked why things have not changed is because it's only women who have been advocating. The men who are the affected, who are the ones
Effectors.
perpetrators, if you want to use that word, I'm sorry to use it. But those who are silent when the injustice happens, we need them to be a part of this process. So I'd like to invite every person, including my son who is here, to be a part of the solution and stop the silence is the part of the problem. Yes. I urge that the silence is the part of the problem. Let's talk more about this. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I found the passage.
Yeah, sure.
I think building up the point I've just made, and I'm sure it's there in your 5.1 or something there, but I think as a consumer, if it's the male member who's creating the demand, and I've read papers, we've read stories about how, for example, labor people who are not in their hometowns going to cities, where I think as a human being, sex is a basic requirement in that sense, and they're one of the people who end up using services for people like these, like with truck drivers who are on the roads for many days. And there are some initiatives being done by transport companies to see how drivers don't stay away from home for long and all that. But I think a more basic, and that's probably my question and a suggestion, is that if there was actually a mandatory requirement for a young male child to be educated and made aware more and more of this.
Right from
I don't know how far is that happening, but happy to hear your thoughts if there's anything happening in that regard.
There are a lot of men's organizations who have become our allies. So there's something called Men Engage, and they exist in every country, and they take on issues of toxic masculinity which harm women, and also MAVA, Men Against Violence Against Women, and many such groups. So yes, now slowly men don't want to be caught in this trap of toxic masculinity, because they are also forced into stereotypes which they don't like. And that you have to be the breadwinner, you have to be the hunter, you have to be aggressive and this and that, because many men are gentle. There used to be the definition of the gentleman, and they want to recover that. So I think there is a move towards men who say we want to be painting and cooking and be more minimalist and gentle and all of that. And those men have to come forward and show the face of that person. That's really, really important, which is why I have a character like Salman in my book. And just today, somebody told me his name is Salman. I hope he's still in the audience. I'm very glad that you came for this.
And I think Rohini Nilekani Philanthropies is also working specifically in this space now, recognizing it's a problem. Yeah.
That's right. So I found the passage that Manira wanted me to read. It's just when Hira begins to learn Kung Fu. The instructions begin. Left, right, press your thighs, back straight, shoulder down, breathe deeply. As I relax down into what I think is the horse stance, Rinidhi comes and straightens my back. Don't push your chest inward. Rinidhi shows me. All power in Kung Fu comes from the ground. I try to feel the pull of the earth. I embrace gravity, letting it connect with my body. Somehow it's more natural than I could have ever imagined. Something happens. My body loosens up and lets go. I open up my shoulders instead of slouching over my breasts in shame. I inhale deeply into my expanded lungs. I think of when I felt like fighting in the past, how the tension in my body seemed to swallow me. I wasn't in control then, but now I feel as light as air. The gravity centers me, the earth carries me, the day's anxieties don't exist. The earth has absorbed them. I feel as though I can move my body in any direction. We move to the forward stance. Rinidhi shows us how to shift our weight from onto the front leg. We bend the front knee, our back leg straight towards the side like a drawn bow. By the time we finish the cat stance, the twist and the crane stance, I'm exhausted. I can feel every muscle ache, every pore breathe. The shame, the guilt, and the fear that have been embedded in every cell of my body seems to have seeped out of me. I have always hated my body, my breasts and hips, the parts of me that gave me away. They marked me out for the fair in Ravi Lala's eyes. I push my shoulders back and open up my chest without fear. I am calm, though my heartbeat is loud. For the first time, it seems, I notice different parts of my body. Finally, Rinidhi says, relax. Remember, Kung Fu is not just about physical strength. It is about channeling your energy, or chi, to use your strength effectively. The more you practice, the more you train your mind and body to work together, the more you will reach the highest stage of Kung Fu, a state of complete mindfulness. What does that mean? Asked Sadaf. It means your mind and body will connect. They will guide you together. You will choose to listen to both unitedly. If a power is stronger than you will become flexible and let the stronger power spend its energy out onto itself rather than on you. We nod. I mull over the words. She leaves us with a final thought. You cannot be powerful all the time or you will break. You cannot be flexible all the time or you will lose direction. Be like water. Flow, don't crash. I bow to Sifu Rini, then in all the four directions of the coon. I will fly, not crash. Namaste.
I think there are one or two more questions. Yeah.
Just say it loudly, I think. Oh, okay.
Hello. Hi, my name is Kushi and I am a psychology and journalism student. I'm here with my friends and we're very happy to be here. You talked about how prostitution becomes intergenerational in these communities and how self-defense was introduced as a way for these little girls to reclaim the autonomy over their bodies. And you also after that mentioned PTSD, and you touched upon that. So how have you dealt with the intergenerational trauma that gets embedded in these young minds? So how have you dealt with it?
Actually, that is the topic of today, art and activism, because the intergenerational trauma is so deeply embedded. If you're born in the same mud hut where you're going to be sold into prostitution, where your mother, your sister, your cousins, everyone up and down that lane is being exploited. You can hear them crying, you can hear them shouting, you can hear them being beaten up, and that's going to be your fate. So, of course, the trauma begins from the time you're born, and you're told that's your destiny too. And there are rituals created around it, that you will be married to a banana tree, I described that, and that you will be auctioned when the fair comes, and then the person who is the highest bidder will put a nose ring on you, and then that nose ring will be removed, and all of this. So the trauma is very deeply embedded. One is of being a girl who's going to be sold. One is belonging to a community which is looked down by the entire town, even your schoolmates. And the third is, of course, the trauma of just being hungry and poor and just physically challenged in so many different ways, from having a roof leaking to not having food, not even having shoes to wear to school, right? So I describe all of that, in my book in different ways. And the way I dealt with it, because that was the reality of what I was dealing with. So I dealt with it through art. In my community center, I didn't have trained psychologists, right? It's in Forbesganj, where will I find therapists and all of that? So, we began with painting lessons, and one woman told me, I used to ask them, what's your favorite color? And one woman said, it's black. And I said, why? She says, because when the customer is on top of me, I shut my eyes and see black. So they began to see other colors when they were painting. Then they were saying, then we began storytelling, theater, mime, song, dance, of course, dance therapy. We use a lot of dance therapy because it's both healing and empowering. And of course, karate and kung fu. So this became part of our weekly activity schedule. And it just gave so much sustenance to people.
Ruchira, would you like to share where the children of the generation that has broken the cycle, where they are and what your plans are for them?
So I can tell you stories about the 3,000, and I told you I stopped counting after COVID because, we had to just scale up getting food out during the lockdown, and we gave out food to more than 500,000 families for a whole year. Our target was 1 million meals, and we ended up giving 12 million meals. And I told the team, let's stop counting and let's just keep doing now. We don't have to prove anything to anybody, and data is data, and we don't need to spend time on that. For us, it's flesh and blood and human beings who matter. So then the 3,000 that we had counted, 3,400 girls who had finished school and college, they were keeping in touch with me, and they became my volunteers in the food distribution program because many of them were still living in community. And, one's a police officer. Couple of them are chefs. One became an animation artist, managers in like Domino's pizza parlors, gas station managers and attendants, security guards, scholarships to, some of them came on scholarships to America and then decided to come back to India and work here. And so many are teachers, one became a nurse, few became nurses, and some also started their own businesses, and which is there in the epilogue. Many became seamstresses, running little tailoring shops, chai ka shop, masala shop. Some even used their dancing skills to become, people who did events at weddings. they would go and perform and all of that. So just different ways, but their lives were no longer based on exploitation. And where I began working, the book that where it's set in Forbesganj, when I began working, there were 72 brothels, right? And by the time I'm talking to you now, all the brothels except 2, which have aging out prostituted women, all of them are shut. And the mud huts have been reclaimed by the women, and the children have finished school and college, and the traffickers are in jail. So people like Ravi Lala and Gainul are actually in jail. And so the red light area has got transformed and become a green light area. And the rooms which used to be brothels in the mud huts are now the places of business for the women. Tea stores, darzi ka dukan, masala shops, chai shops, etc.
So it is possible, basically. Yeah.
Yes. And there's also someone in a black t-shirt.
Yeah.
And white t-shirt.
Hi. So my question, first of all, I would like to say, I hope you're proud of yourself. I mean, we all are proud of you, but you are proud of yourself. So, yeah, because you're not allowed to be that. So, the question that I have is that, like he said that the truck drivers need sex, or don't female need sex? Like, if I look at this in the most opposite way, it may sound crass or it may sound very pathetic in terms, but what if women start demanding that from men? And what if women start doing that to little boys? Then probably will the men understand the gravity of it, or will they actually do something about it? I mean, this is because I do have friends, as in boys' friends, who have faced that exploitation in their own houses by their some uncle or whatever. This has happened, and it's like a man-to-man thing, not just man to female or the other way around. So this is just putting it out that when the gender interchanges, would things be better?
Would things change?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we all want sex and we all have hormones, but sex should be based on mutual pleasure, not one person's pleasure. And what happens with prostitution is the woman does not get the pleasure, right? No one waits for her to reach any kind of orgasm or anything, just to be blunt. I don't know if you're going to cut that out. But the fact is that that's what we have to change the notion of, like, what is mutual pleasure, right? And the same thing is when it's a woman exploiting a boy, because she's not thinking about his pleasure. Yes, he will have something because we all have nerve endings, but along with that, he'll have pain, he'll have fear, he'll have guilt and shame, which will mark him for life, and that happens too, right? So we have to think about this, that wherever there's a power differential, how do we bridge that, in the quest for our own pleasure? And also, we did research and we found that the people who were buying sex in the red light districts were not migrant workers. The majority of people who are buying sex are actually not blue-collar workers. It's white-collar men between the ages of 25 and 45 and married. So this whole mythology, everything, as we began to do the research, we found it was different. And who wanted sex with domination. That was the reason they were going into the red light districts. And I think there's something like that which is happening inside homes too, when children are being molested or abused. They are powerless, right?
Ruchira, thank you for this. Firstly, I must thank my wife for giving me a 2-minute introduction about half an hour before we left. But I must confess that I'm deeply embarrassed that I haven't heard about your work before, and the work that you do. It's just mind-blowing. The question was, of the more than 3,000 girls who have actually gone back into doing, who've broken that cycle and have gone back, have any of them returned to some old, kind of exploitative situations, and how have they dealt with that?
They are always challenged, but we have created support groups of 10 girls or 10 women each. When they were in school, we used to call them Kishori Mandals and then Mahila Mandals, So we created these groups. And so they're in touch with each other also, because I knew that there will be moments in life when, Apne Aap may not be there, a community center may not be there. So we created these. And now through technology, we're also creating WhatsApp groups. So we are in touch with them. And they have faced many challenges, but the interesting thing is they're hanging in there. Like they've got jobs and they're helping their mothers out also in different ways. So it's fascinating to me how a little bit of help can go a long way. It really goes a long way.
And also being, through education, being kind
Something
of
happens,
removed
yeah.
from the space, right? And that is why the homes for girls and women in crisis so important, so necessary. The safe space, because I work with a global organization, and more now we are getting, we are hearing from the ground that there are more and more girls and women leaders under threat for their leadership. It could be a climate activist, it could be someone taking on GBV, it could be someone spreading education. And when they come under threat, there is nowhere for them to go. So how do we protect, how do we save, how do we take them out of that situation, provide safety, legal fees if necessary? It's literally the need of the hour, because more and more in the pushback that we are seeing globally, girls and women are facing the brunt across all verticals, whether politician, journalist, climate activist, GBV, any space.
As we succeed, we are facing the backlash, right? It's like domestic violence. Many of you are too young to know that, but in the past, people would say it's life, wo unka mamla hai, and stay silent. Today we say it's a crime. But it took a movement, to shift that attitude. And we are hoping to do the same with this. When people say, oh, it's a job or it's a choice, we want to say, no, actually, it's a lack of choice and it's not a job, it's exploitation. So that's what we are trying to do with each thing that we are doing. And the backlash is pretty ugly sometimes, from physical attacks to, gaslighting to trivializing what we do, it's a lot. It's a lot. And also, as she said, there are governments, who will also put up obstacles to successful NGOs, because civil society then shows up what they are not doing. And that's another issue, right? So there's all of that.
Opponents, right?
Yeah, opponents, people who want the status quo. So they'll say, oh, aisa to nahi hota hai, you're exaggerating, right? Or...
She just wants foreign funding.
Foreign funding or publicity, right? So that kind of thing. Or not that I can take foreign funding.
So for example, we have seen it with climate activists, right? The first thing you will do is to poke holes in the work she does, and it'll be online. So there will be like a devalidation of the work. So you kind of demolish someone online, and no one realizes the amount.
The Me Too movement faced that.
The Me Too movement, but you're seeing it more and more with climate. It'll be she's been put up by this organization against this organization. No one looks at the work. So you ruin people's reputations, their work. You don't take into account how much it takes every day to get up, to go out and to do that work, right? So then slowly the mental health starts to suffer, the activism takes a back seat, and people are actually stepping away. We are seeing the direct relationship between online violence and women stepping away from public leadership. The numbers are coming in. Fewer women are willing to run for political office because of this online violence. So it comes in waves, right? For you, it'll be...
Me too, they don't exist, or they're exaggerating the issues. What about the women
who have fake accusations against men, etc., etc.? So, different kinds of gaslighting. And, the numbers are exaggerated, or where is the data? and especially if you're a community-based organization, and luckily I've stood my ground because as the women rightly said, I have access to money and privilege and networks and its communication skills. But there are people who are working in community incessantly, and they are forced to go through the hoops of bureaucracy and producing data and chasing big foundations who create indicators which have no meaning whatsoever when you're working on the ground, So that's another challenge that, and especially imagine if suppose you're a group of survivors of prostitution and you want to form an NGO, you have to latch on to someone who's educated to carry on because you just can't. Either you'll be trivialized, ki, haan, theek hai, aap kar rahe hain, I'll give you a little bit of money and carry on or whatever, or solutions from the top down, they'll say, you must do microcredit. Microcredit like what? Put your body on sale and that's going to be your income generating method. Nobody understands the reality.
I have one question. My name is Abbal, and so I want to ask people like you can impact very much at national and international level. So that community is a community which is very deprived from historical lens also. So do you see there should be a policy intervention, or should they have categorized into the scheduled tribe or scheduled caste reservation, because they cannot come out from that the socioeconomic condition until and unless something cannot be done. So what is your take?
So there is the denotified tribes in India. There are many of them, but the ones I work with are Nats, Bedias, Sasi, Kanjars. There are 16 such groups who are trapped in intergenerational prostitution. And all of them, when India became independent, we removed, or what we call denotified, the law which the British had made, the Criminal Tribe Act. So the law doesn't exist now. Nobody is labeled as a criminal in independent India. But the stigma and the discrimination remain. So the police still continue to round up people from these communities if a theft is committed or whatever. And the town thinks, oh, they're pimps and prostitutes. They are categorized. They come under either scheduled caste or OBC category or Dalit category. So they do get that. They come under OBC. They come under the Nuts in Bihar. The ones I work with, they're coming under OBC category. And then in other places, some come under SC. So it depends. And they're both Hindus and Muslims, denotified tribes. So what happens then is that, but even inside such groups, inside OBC and SC, there is a caste hierarchy in India is endless, right? So even there is hierarchy, and these groups are looked down by people inside the OBC category, inside the SC category, and then of course by the higher castes, of course. So they cannot access even the entitlements which are available for OBC and SC, though that's exactly what Apne Aap tried to do. So we helped them get their birth certificates, we helped them get their caste certificates, we got them listed as OBCs or SCs depending on where we were working in Delhi or Calcutta or Bihar. And then we took them to the ration dealer and said, you have to give her low-cost food or whatever. And one of the big struggles was, just getting the kerosene dealer to give kerosene. And the women wrote a beautiful story about it in a A4 size PDF newspaper we bring out called Red Light Dispatch, in which how they all went to the kerosene dealer and gherowed him and said, here's our certificate and you have to give us our kerosene, and how they got that. Or, getting their photograph taken for a document. They went with a 500 rupee note from our NGO to the photo shop, and he said, ye jali hai. And they said, our women's collective will not have a jali note, So each small things which seem so small to us, they are empowerment for them.
And the allocations are there, right? And the money is there.
And we need more money. We need more money, and we need special allocations also for denotified criminal tribes. So you're right about that. We need more.
Yeah, because the book captures how if just what is allocated you can tap into, that's a life changed. Basically everything changes. But above and beyond your oppression then is to go through the system to just try and get what your due is, which puts you back again so far. So yeah.
And we are just worried that even these allocations will go, let alone getting more. You must have all read Charles Dickens. And you remember in Oliver Twist, he gets up in this foster home And, some trustee is visiting the foster home and he says, give me more. And that creates a furor, how could he ask for more? But this is it, yes. So that's why people like us can't give up and we have to keep building our collective voices.
On that note, sorry, one more question? Okay, this is the last question for the evening.
How often or how many of our politicians or the lawmakers do better than the NGOs or walk hand in hand with you?
Can you ask it again?
I didn't. How often our politicians or the enforcers do better than the NGOs or at least walk with you?
I have had friendships and allies from good political leaders and also from bureaucrats, For example, I just did the book release in Bihar in the Bihar Museum, and the Director General of the Bihar Museum used to be Secretary Education when I was running my girls' hostel. And, when the kidnappers were jumping over walls and all, so I would call him and I say, I can't do anything. And he would order his office to say, ki unko paisa do to make the walls higher. Or, just practical things. Or he would send a team from Patna to talk to us. So sometimes, if you get a good officer, it becomes protection. You can expand your work. You can stabilize your work. I have other allies, there was a man called PM Nair, there was a secretary called Bhamati, there was Sujat, like many, there were people who helped us. And then, of course, there were absolutely corrupt people, who were also police officers and judges. And they would take like bribes from the traffickers, and they would say that, we would rescue a girl from a brothel, and they would say, we are going to give her back to the trafficker because he says he's her father. And I remember standing in a court in Katihar in Bihar, and this judge is sitting on stage and he says, the man is saying he's a father. How can I give her to this mother who you say is a member of your NGO? After all, she's a woman of bad character. So I said, but we can do a DNA to test whether she's the mother or not. The man is just making it up. And he would say, we don't have resources for DNA. So then I would say that then you have to believe the mother, I'm sure there's no better proof, and my NGO is willing to stand by. And so, we have had challenges from good and bad, but we have had people who walked. Otherwise, how would we even get the laws changed? Somebody has to sign the law. Somebody has to turn the bill into an act. And so people have voted with us, and many NGOs even visited, many political leaders have visited my NGO right in Forbesganj or in Sonagachi or in Delhi and supported us. All over the world, from Hillary Clinton, who came to Calcutta, and one girl actually did a karate show for her when she came to Calcutta, to Ramvilas Paswan, who came also to one art exhibition, to Rahul Gandhi, who came in Forbesganj, from all political parties. Even now, I have people who have interned with me, who have become deputy chief ministers or ministers, and they want to help. So I can tell you that there is possibility.
And on that note, please join me in thanking Ruchira and Manira for the conversation and for their work. I think the conversation not only was expansive about the general industry, but also with specific examples from the book as well. The book is available for sale outside, and I'm sure Ruchira will be happy to sign. And I assure you that the conversation, which will go up without any edits, will help a lot of people who watch it as well. So thank you all of you for being here. Thank you for your questions. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.